So to come to the being, to the essence nature, to your naturalness is an invitation to find out who you are without your story. To come to recognize that the story is protection, that the story is your needs met structure, that the story is what has been learned about yourself, but is a great misunderstanding. It is not the truth. And so this invitation to come to the being, to remember the true essence nature, is to remember who you are without the story, without the needs met structure, without the protection. So we can come to the being and we can open to the felt sense of the expansion and beauty, freedom and peace of being pure awareness. But what will keep pulling us back in to identification is the learned story of who we are. It's that we've learned a story about who I am as a person, and we've learned to behave according to that learned story. And it's unconscious in so many ways. And this invitation is to bring it into consciousness, bring it all into the light of consciousness, not to negate it, not to try to push it away and create a new, more spiritual persona. It's to fully accept, to fully say yes to all that we have believed we are, in order to see that we are not bound by the story. We're not bound by the beliefs about who we are. But we first have to come to a place of actually seeing that what we are believing about ourselves is not the truth. Even opening to see that there is so much that is unconscious in the ways that we move and interact. In a way, the ways that we interact are the signposts of our protections. We can continue to be disappointed in the world and disappointed in people, but essentially that disappointment is our needs met structure. It's our story about ourselves, recreating the dynamics that keep confirming, you see, this is who you are. You see, you're unlovable, you're unworthy, you're not worth listening to. So we continue to perpetuate what we have learned about ourselves. So we have to come to see that what we have learned about ourselves is not the truth of who we are. The truth of who we are is this pristine, shining being that is pure and natural, is love, is light, is happiness and joy. And so when we are not experiencing this directly, the peace, the happiness, the joy, the simplicity, it is just a sign that we are moving in the story about who we are, and that we are creating dynamics out of that story. So of course, some of that is going to be karmic obscuration, because we have to live through a certain amount of karma in order to release the desire mechanisms. And that desire mechanism is really an entanglement in the story. It's that we're entangled and we're trying to get our needs met in the story. So the whole desire mechanism is where we are bought into the illusion, where we're convinced that the way of life is to keep pushing through life, trying to get our needs met in the worldly, in people, in relationships and things. But that is the whole needs met structure. So the needs met structure is really exactly the same as the desire mechanism. So when we have the grace to be invited to see how this is all operating from a different perspective, it offers us the possibility of freedom from this. What we're talking about is not psychological functioning or psychological processing. What we're speaking of is illuminating the dynamics that play in the life so that we can free ourselves from the tangle and create more space to see clearly and not need to try to get our needs met through really what are manipulative, subtly manipulative means, because we learned our needs met structure is usually subtly manipulative. And the curious and rather crazy thing is that what the needs that we're trying to get met is usually a confirmation that we're not enough. It's usually a confirmation of some kind of belief that we have something lacking or missing. So we create dynamics that keep confirming our story of not enoughness, because this is what's familiar. And so it's comfortable and it seems safe to the mind because it's familiar. And yet it makes us miserable. We keep creating repeating relationship dynamics in all kinds of environments that keep confirming the story that we have about ourselves. It's not about changing the story, because in a way, the story that is etched in, it's set, it was set. It's about seeing through the story, seeing that you are not the story. So all attempts to make a better story are never really going to fully bring freedom. A better story is still a story, it's still separation. And in truth, a better story will still be repeating those core dynamics until we really see through, that we really see through, that the way that we see the world, the way that we see people, the way that we see everything is according to our story about ourselves. It's like we're inside a filter and we're looking out and we're seeing through that filter. And the filter is the story that we have about ourselves. So we're seeing every being as we see ourselves. The more that the reflection that we, let's say, that we start to see is more simple and loving, it's because we come to recognize the simplicity and the love that we are. It's as our protections fall away and we open to the being that we can know this truth of who we are, the naturalness, the simplicity, the openness, the shining radiance of our true nature. But sometimes as we are speaking of this, the mind can come in and it can find the words that are very exuberant, almost challenging, because the mind says, well, I'm not that. I'm not joyful and radiant and brilliant and shining. I'm feeling kind of frustrated and agitated right now, right? But this is just a sign. It's just a sign that we're not fully in our true nature, because the truth is that as we come to our true nature, there's this freedom and this confidence that can just express itself and shine. And it isn't trying to hold back and hold to a story. It's not trying to be what another being needs you to be, right? So when we're resting in this truth, we can shine. We can be the radiant open heart. We can be confident in that. We can say yes and no and feel really sure this is what's right, because we're not needing approval or validation or permission from anything external according to our needs met structure or according to our beliefs about ourselves and a fear that we may lose connection or how we might be perceived, or a fear that we'll be unloved, right? And all of our story is playing into these streams of limitation that say, don't lose love, so stay attached, say the right thing, move in the right ways, right? And so our relationship dynamics are really an incredible reflection of our story about ourselves, right? So sometimes as we're opening to the being, the fear can come up. Oh, do I have to give up my relationship? No, give up the story about yourself. Give up the story of limitation and watch the relationships reflect your true nature, right? You see, the mind always goes to changing the external, changing others, changing the situation, changing things. But it's not about changing the people and the environment. It's about changing where the attention is resting. So the attention is not resting in the story about yourself, that your attention is resting in the truth of who you are. Now, this will lead to changes because you may see through a relationship that isn't serving. But, in this kind of change, we don't cut things off. We just shift the dynamics so that the dynamic is more of a clear reflection. Because when we are resting in love, we know that we can't ever cut love off. We can't ever get away from love. We can't ever be unlovable or unloving because we're resting in the knowing that what we are is love. And then we can shift relationship dynamics because we're not afraid of losing, right? We don't have to stay in situations that are unhealthy and toxic and are perpetuating our story. So when we speak of unhealthy and toxic, we're creating that, right? We are absolutely responsible. And this will usually be because we're afraid of changing the story about ourselves. And we can keep working and working to change the story. But until we see that all story is non-truth or all story is partial, right? It's all limited. And we really come to open so that we can trust our deepest felt sense of how we are being moved. And we don't need permission and we don't need to be confirmed by anyone or anything external. That we can live this truth shining, radiant. We can allow rapture and ecstatic bliss to just bubble up randomly because we're not trying to kind of keep it small because we're afraid of how somebody will react. How anybody behaves isn't our business. Let's say it's not our business to change the story out there or any one of the characters. We could say it's to change yourself, but it's not to change your story. It's to magically change into yourself, transform into your true essence nature. And then you start living in this way that's like, well, actually, I really like living alone. I feel really good in this way. I feel better. I feel more clear, right? I feel like this kind of way of living is actually what feels true. And we can just say yes within our own heart without needing any kind of validation anywhere. And what we find is that everything starts to flow and we feel more open, right? So this is just an example. It's just this, it's this way of seeing. But if we are believing the story in any way, then we are limited and restricted. Now life goes on. Life continues to live itself. And there's also these unique flows of the laws of nature that make us unique at the point value. The point value is unique. And so there is a kind of sense of a unique individual experience. But the truth is that you're not individual. You're not even really unique. It seems that way. It's like a unique configuration, but it's all part of the one. It's all God. It's all the glory. There's not a single fiber of you that is separate from divine wholeness. There's not a single thread. Every single fiber of your being is one with what is. And it's about being one with what is and recognizing that exactly the way you are is exactly perfection. And then there's no one that needs to be liberated. There's no one that needs enlightenment. There's no one that needs to be following a teaching. What we then are speaking of is living radiant wholeness. We're just living this right now, just like this. Whatever happens, it doesn't matter, right? That we're not on a path, we're not following a teaching. We're just living this radiant wholeness right now. And there's the recognition that this moment, it could bring anything in. It's a complete surprise. It's kind of exciting and it's completely unknown. And what comes in could be something really, really smooth and easy, or it could be something really challenging, right? But the truth is we don't find it challenging in the same way. We are able to like just move with the waves, right? But we're all one, so we're just moving with it. We're just moving with it. A little bit bumpy. Okay, a little bit bumpy. Okay, it's okay. Yeah, a little bit seasick. Okay, okay, it's just fine. We move with it. And the bumps settle out all by themselves, right? But we don't say, oh my God, it's really bumpy. That means that I am, right? Because then we go into our story. That means that I'm less than, I'm failing. That means that I'm unlovable. That means that I'm this, you know? The mind suddenly uses anything that comes in to make a story that says, you see, I am unlovable. I am a mess. I am whatever the story is. But that story is never true. Life is just living itself, and it takes every shape. It just moves in whichever ways it wants to move. So the great invitation to naturalness is to roll with it, to be absolutely free while you're rolling around in it, right? being your shining, radiant self, whatever is happening. It's not trying to be. It's about being natural, being the openness, being whatever you are in the moment, being tender, feeling tenderness if tenderness comes. It's not about saying, oh, I shouldn't really have any reaction. My granny's just died, but I need to just, be non-dual about this. No. If you feel tenderness in the heart, that the body has dropped of a being that you love, don't restrict anything, right? It doesn't mean anything about you. It's not about, does this mean that I'm awake? Does this mean that I'm not awake? Does this mean that I'm, not living this truth? It doesn't mean anything. It means whatever your mind makes it mean, because there's no one else making it mean anything. And this is what the invitation is, to see that only you are making this moment mean anything. It doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't mean anything. And it definitely doesn't mean anything about you. What you make this moment mean is what your mind is making it mean. And it's making it mean something through the filters. Now, as we come to this naturalness, it's as if the filters fall away and we just don't make anything mean anything. So when we're not making it mean anything, and we don't need permission, and we're not trying to be anything to get love or prove ourselves, we're not afraid of losing connection, then who are we? What are you? Without all of these hooks, what are you? Right? Without a story, without a thought, without fear, without needing anyone's permission, not even your marriage partner, right? What, just to feel in this moment, what if you don't need anything from anyone? What if you don't need to be seen? You don't need to compromise. You don't need permission. If you don't need to feel seen or heard, if you're not afraid of losing, if you don't make this moment mean anything about you, without a single thought, because all of these things that we're pointing to are all essentially thoughts, different ways of thinking, but without a single thought, can you just feel a sense of who you are? Now, sometimes in this kind of invitation, it will actually trigger the thoughts that are challenging, and it will shine the light upon the story. But it's just to see that, and to see if you believe that about yourself, if you believe that you're failing, if you believe that you're not trying hard enough, if you believe that you have to act in a certain way, just shine the light and just feel, who are you? What are you? Without any of that. You might find that you start laughing because suddenly you've put down the burden, right? You can eat whenever you like. You can eat whatever you like. You can go wherever you want, right? You can wear whatever you want. You can just move in exactly the way that you feel the aligned yes. It's true too if you're a parent. Who are you without the children, right? Without that role that you've taken on, without that story of how you have to be. And don't in this moment go to the extra layer of defense that says, well, that's all very well for you, but I actually have to, It's like, just don't go to any kind of defense. Don't go to any kind of story, right? Because it's just this opportunity to just illuminate how bound we are by our stories of how we have to behave, that we've created prisons for ourselves. We've created these stories of how to be and how restricted I am. Oh, and how busy I am. That's a good one, right? No, I'm just so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy thinking about how busy I am that I haven't got time for that. I haven't possibly got time to sit because I'm so busy thinking about how busy I am and making myself more busy, getting busy, 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 right? It's like a busyitis, right? It's part of the human condition. That most of that busyness is the stress of thinking about all the things you imagine you have to do. Because actually in this moment, what's actually here without a thought, what actually is here? Is there anything that really needs to happen without a thought? So what we're inviting is a letting go of tension. You start to be like, oh my God, it's almost like a panic. What if I have all this space? What if I'm really free? What if I'm really free? Yeah. What if you really are free? What if you really are completely and utterly free to just be yourself, to be natural, to be the openness, to be the simplicity of being? It takes the most enormous courage to see how entangled we are and how we actually are perpetuating our entanglement, because we want that more than we want God. Now, that's not an easy thing to take in, but we want our entanglement and our story more than we want God. When we really come to find out the truth of that, because if all we really want is God, and God is here, right? God is this moment, free of the story. It is the being. It is the simplicity, the naturalness. And yes, we come to find that God is everything, but we have to find this truth of the being first, our own naturalness. We have to fall into our own nature so that we can so deeply see the reflection of our own self, our own God nature in absolutely everything. That finding God in everything isn't about looking out there and finding God. It's about finding God in your true nature. And then that you're the reflection of what you know about yourself is shining as reality. It's the divine life. This divine life is to be lived fully on the surface. It's not to be kept a secret. We're here to shine this light, to shine this radiance, right? To simply be. So the invitation is about seeing through the entanglement. Sometimes beings ask, you guys ask, this one here, why do I feel free and peaceful in your company? Because we don't meet in the story, and because I don't believe your story. And there's just this love here that is just an invitation to meet, not in the story, not in your ways of relational dynamics. Even if you try to create those with me, I won't play it. And that's why. It's not because I'm some kind of exalted being that you're not, although projections might want to make that true. You're just as divine and pure as you see this one as being. But this one is just living it. This one is just fearlessly rambling on about the beauty and the divinity and the gorgeousness and the radiance of the heart, right? I'm just fearlessly speaking what is true. And I'm fearlessly speaking what is true about you. You are exactly the same. Whatever you see here, you're seeing only a reflection of yourself. Whether you are loving me or whether you are judging me, you're only seeing yourself, right? So the truth is that when all story drops away and there's a meeting in the oneness, we find just love. And so the chances are that in connection with me, if there isn't a filter or a karma playing, you'll just feel that, because I won't engage with you on that level that's not true. I won't affirm your beliefs about yourself. I won't commiserate in those dramatic stories. I will just keep shining and shining back at you the possibility that maybe you're not that. Maybe you're not that. And maybe what you are is this shining, radiant moment, just as it is. Maybe what you are is love. And maybe all of that stuff that you believe about yourself is not the truth. So we speak about it simply. We speak about it in openness. Because the mind can create even ways of separation by creating like a teaching, an exalted teaching, something that's unreachable, right? Oh, that enlightenment, oh, that's like, you know, I'm a gazillion lifetimes away from that. Not even true. It's right here now, right? Everything of the world is a story. Don't forget that. Everything of the world, even spiritual teachings, right? We have this possibility to see through it all, to see through it all. And come to the freedom of who you are right now. See the subtle ways that the mind makes this possibility of being natural and open and free, something that somehow is not for me, somehow I'm not worthy of. But that's the story. And if you really believe that story, you might create a spiritual environment that perpetuates that story. You might create an environment where you're having that reflected back to you. And not here. You're here because you're ready. You're here because there's a readiness to see through the story, a readiness to be the natural being, to be the wide open heart. You're ready to hear this truth. It's not about creating another story about yourself. It's not about creating anything. It's about illuminating and seeing all of the ways that we create obscuration. Who are you without the story? Who are you without all of those lines of protection and defense? You are love. You are light. You are openness. You are the pristine, radiant being. Everything that is happening, that plays as the life, is an opportunity to receive the reflection. So the grace is not to project upon the situation and the beings. It is to really explore the feelings, be with the feelings, illuminate the projections, illuminate the entanglements. And in illuminating the story, it's to illuminate this needs-met structure. Because in a way, it's a process to uncover that structure. Because it's like we protect that structure. We protect that with more thoughts about it. We keep it in place by thinking more about it and imagining that we can't let it go. But we have this possibility to come to these moments, precious, profound moments where the light is on and we're playing something out. And the illumination just says, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to keep playing it out. You don't have to keep being angry. You don't have to keep asking for permission. You don't have to keep moving in dynamics that feel unhealthy. You don't have to keep moving in these ways. And when the illumination really shines, there's a landing, a rooting that takes responsibility and says, oh, I don't have to do that. That's the needs met structure. That's the way I've learned to get the needs met. That's how I am moving. That's what I am creating. This is what I learned to create. And then we start to free these ways of moving, these ways of creating. And it's not a doing, it's a seeing, it's an illumination where there's a sense that you make yourself, you make God, you make this truth the most important thing. And you realize that this, resting in yourself, resting in freedom, this is the most loving act. This is an act of true spiritual activism. This is the most profound act of peace, like a peace activist, a love activist. It's the deepest, most profound possibility is to rest in the freedom and the peace of your heart and not be tossed around by the play of life, to rest in the depth of knowing who you are and not be tossed around, because here you trust that every being is moving in exactly the way that is needed. That to rest in the true essence nature and to meet all of the feelings that come up in what it takes to rest here, because it takes a lot. It takes a huge amount of courage to not just be pulled in and not just say, oh, well, I'll just, right? It's not about changing seeming others. It's about being yourself and resting in this peace and trusting that what every being has to go through is what every being has to go through. And it can be the most profound work to witness beings moving through things where you want to be able to save them. You want them to see things differently. You want to help them. You want for them to feel the peace and love and truth of who they are. But it's through feeling it yourself. It's feeling it yourself and meeting them in this truth where you trust that every being has what it takes. Every being has what it takes to see clearly in right timing. And you hold that truth in holding it for yourself, right? Now from here, of course, there will be true movement that brings interaction and relating, of course. It's not about sitting all by yourself in a cave. It's about relating and connecting. But from this truth, right? And meeting the grace of what is brought up in this process, because it brings up everything that we have to meet in order to come to freedom. We can recognize that past relationships, without the story of that relationship, you can smile and say, oh, did it even happen? Right? It was all in your mind. How you perceived it, how it played out. He said, she said, they did, right? It's all in the mind. Yes, there was fact, there was appearance in it, but how it was perceived, the story of it is a story. And when we let go of that story, what is here? What is here? How did it really go down? Right? Love was just loving love, and love was seeing it this way and that way, and love was just loving love, and love was just loving love, and love was just loving love. Right? You have a different story. It's just to see that we create through the filters. Our life is living itself out, and it has so many possibilities as consciousness comes to meet itself in order to experience itself and see itself. And it's not about moving within the psychological functioning and trying to understand, because in a way there's times in our life where that can be really helpful. But when we really come to the point of knowing this truth of the being, we're ready to graduate from moving in that world and to really just illuminate everything and see it for what it is. See the possibility that when we can really illuminate the themes of the life, the needs met structure, how we are moving and how we are absolutely responsible for the prisons and confines and limitations that we create. And we're absolutely responsible too for recognizing the freedom. So no one can give this to you. In right timing, the light is seen within you, and you awaken from within. You awaken to your true nature inside you in right timing. And that might be in the presence of someone. It might be just while you're by yourself that a clearer seeing comes, right? So of course it's natural that a clearer seeing might come when in the company of a being that is seeing clearly and reflecting that clarity to you, but not always. Any moment is the moment to see clearly. because the light is inside you. The awakeness, let's say the aperture to the awakeness, is inside you. It's not outside of you. The light shining is in the felt sense of being. It's in the silence. It's in the stillness. And we come to recognize this light shining when there is a moment of no obscuration, when there is no obscuration of mental activity and protection, even just a moment of letting that guard all the way down brings a clear seeing and a clear remembering. And that clear seeing, it's never forgotten. And then it acts as the pull, the draw, the magnetic divine light calling all of itself into itself. So everything that is spoken here is an invitation to follow the pointings into yourself, into the light that you are. To meet here in the oneness, in the light, in the love, in this truth, this simple truth, which is the naturalness of being, underneath the story, underneath of all of the obscurations, underneath the entanglement. There is this pure open field of awake being, and this is the truth of who you are. You are naturally this one. Do not need anything special about you. What is special about you is this. What is special about you is that you already are, right? No one is left out of this. We can try to create specialness in the world, but specialness in the world is like a specialitis. It keeps us from what is truly special, right? What is truly special is like what is truly pure, what is truly divine. It's that which is already whole. That which is already full and rich. That which is without condition. If we try to set it apart, we will create division. But it is the wholeness, true specialness, let's say. It's the letting go of any sense of division and just falling into a oneness that is the illuminated light, where there's no division. There's just holiness, and all beings belong to the holy being, to the holiness. All beings are one with this light. And this moment is the moment. This moment is the moment to remember this, to feel that light and rest in the knowing of the being, to feel the shining radiance of your own heart, or just to feel the tiny glimmering spark, because even that spark is an invitation to fan the flames of your own longing by resting here in the being and turn that spark into a blazing fire. But of course, it takes courage, and it takes to really feel the longing, to turn the attention away from perpetuating the story and really fan your own fire, to really feel what these pointings are inviting, to not resist what is being pointed to. Don't let certain words be a trap where the mind says, oh, I'm not into those words. It's just to see through it all. It's about pointing you into yourself. It's not about pointing you outside. It's about pointing all of the focus into the one being and meeting here in the love and the light that just is. And that there is this knowing already alive in you. That we meet in the wholeness. We meet in the light of being. We meet in the wide open heart that is the self that just is. That the uniqueness, the unique laws of nature are welcome. In a way, we are purifying the vasanas so that we come to the simple laws of nature that are flowing freely and openly. Each being will have certain areas that have more stress, more debris that has to be worked through. And usually most beings will have stress in the areas of relating, because it's in the relational dynamics that we get those reflections. But the stress is not because of that one out there behaving like that. It's because we're creating a repeating, right? To notice it repeats and repeats and repeats. We're creating a repeating storyline. Certain particulars and details will of course shift, but we're creating a repeating storyline with the possibility of untangling ourselves. So where you notice something is repeating, where you're noticing that you're feeling the same feelings in certain relational dynamics, it's an invitation to shine the light and to say, well, what's happening here? How am I creating this? What am I saying yes to? To shine the light and to take responsibility. Because when we shine the light and take responsibility, then we start to really untangle. We start to feel our own feelings. We start to meet our own old stresses and release the karmic entanglements. There are certain things that we just have to live through, but we can live through it, not entangled in it, not entangled in a way we don't even really need to think about or speak about karma at a certain point, because it's just life living itself. And if we're not entangled in it and it doesn't matter, we're essentially free. And we realize that karma doesn't actually entangle us because we're living without any resistance. Mm. 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 So, who are you without the story? Just to feel in this moment, without a single thought, without the fears, without the need to be seen in a certain way. Who are you? Mm. What are you here? Just the simplicity of being. You see the felt sense of your naturalness. You feel just the same. And yet you're free of story. So you feel the same. It's the same self that you have always been. But you're not attached or identified with the story. there's still an appearance of the world. The living of life, the caring for the body, it still happens the same, because you're the infinite being and you're the finite being. You're all of it as one, right? But we want to come to know the being, the peace, the simplicity, the openness of being the pure, aware being that is the seer of all experience, that can illuminate and see through all of the binding ties that the mind creates, to recognize that there is no bondage, there is nothing binding.